This is Gemara Baba Basra Daf Sadi, the learning for the month of Elul. As we're getting towards the end of Elul, has been generously sponsored as a Schos Aliyas Neshama for Rizal Bas Raveir B'Siyata Deshmaya from the place in Gan Eden Shel Maila as her Neshama is elevated. As she watches daf by daf, B'Siyata Deshmaya, the Neshama of Rizal Bas Raveir should go higher and higher. Be a Militz Yashar for entire family and the entire Chabura. We're holding on Daf Sadi Amid Aleph for a middle of discussing the importance of having appropriate weights. Ubemidas halach, 2 legs from the top. When it comes to liquid measurements, you should make them hin v'chatien u'shislein reviyasin v'log v'chatilog reviyas u'shminis v'echad mishmayne v'shminis, which is what v'zeu kartoiv. Those are the ways to make the appropriate weights and measurements. Says the Gemara, v'levinami kabayim. It sounds like these are the precise ways you have to have your weights. But as the Gemara, it says you could have a tire cave, which is 3 kav, and it says you could have a half tire cave, which is a kav and a half. But what about 2 kav? Asked the Gemara. Says the Gemara, you are correct. You were listening carefully. It is incorrect to have such a weight. Why? Asi lechlufe betar cave, because a kabaya measurement could be confused with a tire cave, and therefore it could cause cheating, undercharging, overcharging, etc., etc. Says the Gemara, so based on what you're saying, it comes out Hamato Inchi Tilsa. People make a mistake that when they're a third off of each other, that's the number. It sounds like you have to be worried that there's going to be an issue and confusion of the weights. But ask the Gemara if that is true. Yachi kav nami. When it comes to kav lalav, you shouldn't make a kav measurement. Why? We should be nervous that you're going to come confuse it with half a tar cave, which is 1.5 kav, which is a third larger than 1 kav. So says the Gemara, if the concern is the third, then 1.5 and 1 is a third. Says the Gemara, you're right. So let's go back. So what's the reason you should not do kabayim? Ela kabayim, why not? The reason is the reason is because it might come confused with a chatzi tar cave, which is 1.5 kav, and that is not a third off, but that is a fourth off of. Again, let's get the numbers straight. 1.5 kav would be smaller than the 2 kav by a fourth of the capacity. So says the Gemara, okay, now we have a kash on this. Al matayinchi rivi. What's the problem? Yachi chatzi tuman va'ochla le'avid. Person should not be allowed to make a chatzi tuman, a half of an eighth, va'ochla. Why? Because these are an eighth and a 16th or 20th is a quarter off. A 16th and a 20th is a quarter off from each other. Says the Gemara, Papa, midois kitanois bikibu inchi. Very interesting svara of Rapapa. Interesting just in our world of svara, of course. But that small measurements people are very familiar with, then you're not going to come to confuse them. The Rashbam says they're easy to tell the difference. It's almost like the eye can see the difference. We don't have to be worried about it. Again, I'm just pointing out that maybe one who doesn't know weights like myself would think, what do you mean? A larger item is easier to tell the difference. But I guess that's not the case. Shlishis ahin, Raviyas ahin loylavid. Says more 1 second. A third of a hin, a quarter of a hin. Those are also a quarter off from each other. It says, since these weights were in the base of Mikdash, Lagazbu Rabbanan. B'Mikdash Nami legs, or why not? Kayanim's reason, and we don't have to worry about in the base of Mikdash. Kayanim is reason both in the Zrizis meaning quick, Zrizis meaning diligent, and therefore we don't have to worry about the Kayanim making any mistakes. We're at the 2 dots, 15 lines from the bottom. Amar Shmuel, another din of weights. Ein moisivin alamida is yoser mishros. Says Rav Shmuel, one cannot increase their measurements by more than a ishtos, a 6. And similarly, one cannot increase the value of coins. Again, this is in a city, a town, a shtetl. They have their own coins, they have their own weights, and they want to reevaluate it. Teaches Shmuel, you can't change by a shtos, a 6. In Moisivan Alamidas Yosem Shtos, my timer. So says the Gemara, what is the reason that you cannot increase by a 6? If you're going to tell me if you're going to tell me that the problem is inflation, even on a 6 itself should be a potential cause for inflation. No, which of course I'm sure many people were thinking that this word shtos rings a bell. Of course it rings a bell back from Bamitzia. He's down Eshech Azahav days, which is a shtos is the number of overcharging. So says the Gemara, the reason why you can't change it by a shtos is because of Aina. The reason is because that if, let's say, someone is visiting this town and he doesn't realize that the weights have changed and he charges the old amount, it's going to be a shtos off. So we don't want the sale to be void up until a shtos. The sale is not void. So says Shmuel, the town should not change their weights, change their currency by more than a 6 for what? Because if someone comes and make a mistake, we don't want to make the sale null and void. Asks the Gemara of Amarava called Davar Shebemida Vishebe Mishkol. Says Rava, 1 second. We know there's a rule that anything that is sold by measure, by weight, to be minyan, by number. The whole rule of Aina is when it's not done by precise numbers. So I don't understand, says Rava. Even less than a 6 is going to make the sale void. Allah says the Gemara, you know why Shmuel told them not to change it by a 6? Because he did not want that the merchant should suffer a loss, and therefore he said only change it up until a 6. Asked the Gemara, says the Gemara, we only concerned that he shouldn't suffer a loss. But what about the fact that we need him? We need the merchants to make money. Says the Gemara, does he buy merchandise and sell it not just to be called a merchant? Of course not. He does it to make money. And if he's going to be losing all this cash, he's not going to make any money. So why are we not concerned about that? Ella. Amar Rav Chisda, 4 lines from the bottom. Shmuel, Krashkach Medarish. Shmuel found the pasuk and he darshaned it to teach us that it's up until a 6. Vashekel esim gira esim shkolim chamisha esim shkolim chamisha esim shkolim esara v'chamisha shekel imana yeh lochem. Says the pasuk, a pasuk in Yechezkel about the measurements and the weights. And now says Shmuel, where do we see from this pasuk that you should never change the currency, you should never change the weights by more than a 6? So we turn over to Daf Sadiyam and Beis, and the Gemara explains where Shmuel saw this in the pasuk. Mana masan varbain havu is a mana 240 dinars, 60 shekel. But we know, and the Rashbam here does the math, that's not true. Bitmiya, ask the Gemara, your math is off. A mana is 100 dinars, which is 25 shekel. Elishmamina talas. So says Shmuel, from this pasuk, from the fact that we see the denominations are seemingly off from that which we would have anticipated, says Shmuel, we can learn 3 dinim. What are the 3 dinim? Number 1, Shmamina. Shmamina mana shel kodesh kafalaya. Firstly, we see that the money of Kadosh, the money of the Beis HaMikdash, was double the common amount. Whatever a mana was, the Beis HaMikdash was double. V'shmamina, number 2, moisiven ala midos, that we're allowed to add on to the weights. Vein moisiven, how much is mishtos? Shmamina, number 3, shetusi milvar, that you add on from the outside a 6 of the original measurement and not a 6 of the not a sixth of the new measurement, excuse me, and not a sixth of the original measurement. When it went from 25 to 30, it was a sixth of the new value. A sixth of 30 is 5, which is the change of 25 to 30. That's milbar. Milgav would be if you took a sixth of 25, which in our numbers would not work because we're looking for 5, 25 to 30. Rapapa says the Gemara story. 5 lines from the top. Daf Sadi Amid Beis. Rav Papa Bar Shmuel talking. Kalia Bar Tlasa Kapizi. Rav Papa Bar Shmuel established a measure of 3 kapizi, which is 9. Look, Amrule, they said to him, I've Amar Shmuel in Moisivan Alamidos Yoiser Mishtos. What's going on? Shmuel said you cannot increase the midas more than a 6. And it's by a third. You do the math over here. 6 lugin, it comes out to a third. Amrlu ana kaila chadatakini. Says Shmuel, I didn't change it. I created a completely new measure. Therefore, it's not a problem if it's larger than the old one by more than a 6, because it's not just changing the old measurement; it's a new denomination. Shadri lepumpadisa v'lo kablua. So Rav Papa Bar Shmuel sent a measure to Pumbedisa to see are they going to accept this new measurement as currency, as a way to measure. They didn't accept it. Shadru lepapu noi, sent it to Papa Noi v'kablua. Karule Ruz Papa. They called it Rav Papa as a measure once they accepted. And again, we have another siman over here. Again, a call to realize the power of simanim. And hopefully very soon we'll be incorporating is probably the right word, the Zichru incredible system to our Daf Yomi. I really tell everyone to check them out. They have an app, they have a website, they have WhatsApp, they have email, they have everything. An incredible way of memorizing or knowing the Gemara much, much better. Tanu Rabbanon, 7 braysos based off of that simin. Those who hoard peiros, those who lend the ribis, those who reduce the size of the ephah, those who mess up the prices, after learning so many different dinim of the critical importance of having the right weights. Says the Gemara, Braisa, what happens to those that don't do such? Says the Basik, Lemar Masa Yaver Achidesh, Vinishra Shever. Says the Basik, a Basik in Amos, when will the month pass so we can sell the meal of Shabbos, the Niftach Chabar? And when will the 7th year pass so we can open up the storehouses? Lahakdin Efo, Lahakdil Shekel, Avis Moznai Mirma. And when we'll be able to reduce the measurements and enlarge the shekel to make things right again. And another pasuk says, Nishva Hashem b'goin Yaakov im eshkach lanetzach kol maseim. Says the pasuk, Hashem has made a shvua by the pride of Yaakov. He'll never forget their maisim, their deeds. Says the Gemara, what do we see from this price? Man, who is one who hoards fruit? Shabtai, the hoarder of produce, and he hoards it so he can sell later when there's no more produce and he can rip people off. Terrible, terrible thing to do. Shmuel's father would sell the produce at the early market, early in the season, at the early market prices. Ketara, Shmuel Berei, Ketara, Charfa. Shmuel Berei, Mashan Leperi, Mazanu, Betara, Afla. Shmuel's son would hold on to the produce, and he would sell at the late market for Ketara, Charfa, for the early prices. Shalchu mitan, they sent from Eretz Yisrael, Tava da'ava medabra. They sent from Eretz Yisrael, the mice of his father are better than the son. It's better that the father sold early at the early prices, even than Shmuel, that sold late at the early prices. Why, my taima? Says the Gemara, what's the reason? Tara de ravach, ravach. The reason is because once the prices go down, it goes down for the rest of the year. So that what Shmuel did by holding onto the stuff and selling it later isn't as big of a benefit as allowing the poor to have the produce early. Amar Rav, says Rav, Isa Adam is kaboy oitzer. Says Rav, a person should make his own portion into an eitzer or hoard. Tanam Yachi. Ein eitzer peiros tavarim sheish ben chayin nefesh. One should not hoard produce out of the staples of life. Gon yenus ushmanim uslas, wine, oil, and flour. Aval tav leinekamoin upilpulin, seasonings, cumin, and pepper. Mutter, those items you could hoard. But medvar ma'amurim l'kech min hashok. Aval memachlis mishaloi. Mutter, but when you gather your own produce, you're allowed to withhold it from the market, like Rav said. Rav teaching that one's own items, he does not have to sell it. He's allowed to hold on to it, to have it at a later point when it is worth more. Mutter la'adam la'atzer peiros b'eretz Yisrael gimel shanim. It says the Gemara 4 lines from the white lines. What is allowed to hoard produce in Eretz Yisrael for 3 years? Which 3 years? Erev Shvius Shvius u'maitzai Shvius. In years of famines, afilu kav charuvin lo yatzar, even a little kav of carob one should not hoard. Why? When they shemachnis meira b'sharim. Why? Because it could cause havoc in the markets, and therefore one should be careful at a time of famine, a time when the food is a bit scarce. And finally, we end with the story of Rav Yossi Rav Chanina on the first white line. Lefuga shamei. Tefuga was the attendants of Rav Yossi Bar Chanina. Go and store and hoard the produce for 3 years. Proving the price that we just saw. That's when you're allowed to hold on to the produce. We'll stop over here. We'll pick it up for the next brisa in Mirza Hashem.